afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. You can hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Fantastic. So today, as always, we have a very interesting and accomplished panel that's going to be looking at the topic from different perspectives. And during this panel, we are going to discuss on basically how SEZs can support and facilitate regional value chain development. That would include basically intra-regional trade and investment, and the Africa Intra-Trade Initiative, and vice versa. How can the Africa Intra-Trade Initiative can facilitate SEZ development in a fashion where it actually is facilitative, concerted, and it becomes a base, a platform for enhancing productivity, competitiveness to actually elevate the level of intra-regional trade and investment to across the countries. In that regard, we have actually a very interesting panel. I'll introduce the panel very briefly because we have limited time. They can add if they would like a little bit more, and I'll keep my intervention short. We have DJEMBA, who is the Chief of the Regional Division for Africa at United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. We have Mr. Stephen KARINGI, who is currently the Director for Regional Integration and Trade Division of the Economic Coalition for Africa. We have Dr. EDEM ADZOGENU, who is co-chair for Africa Champions. He's an accomplished investment facilitator, government affairs, and international crisis management specialist. And we have MULUALEM SYOUM, who is the CEO and chairman of the board of directors and founder for basically the African Electronic Trade Group. This gives us actually a very interesting panel to look at the issue from different perspectives, from basically a trade and economic commission perspective, from a UNIDO perspective, looking at the regional and going regional and national when we are looking at this. And with MULUALEM and EDEM, basically we are going to look at how we can use technology in different aspects of SEZ development and facilitation of trade. And in that regard, actually, one of the things that we discussed in earlier panels and earlier events was how do we look at zones in this overall initiative? Because one of the things we need to actually do, and I'll ask basically the panelists to look at this a little bit more detail in their discussion, is making sure that we have a common understanding of what are the models for SEZs we are thinking about as part of the trade discussions. Because we need to have a more uniform understanding of basically what are we talking about, and enhance our view from the old basically EPZ type of an enclave regime to what we have today. And we need to actually look at a few more things. One is what's happening global and regional trends. What's happening with Industry 4.0, rise of services in manufacturing, increasing services participation in SEZs. What's happening basically in terms of inclusion of robots, different changes in the shape of value chains globally and regionally, and how will it affect regional value chain development, and what do we need to think about as part of the free trade agreement? And how are the VCs changing in response to COVID and resilience? What are those issues that we need to think about in enhancing regional value chain development and looking at the trade agreement? And what's happening with SEZs? Are we talking about manufacturing, agribusiness, healthcare, services? And how are we integrating our thoughts on ecosystems? Because zones are actually a combination of hard and soft infrastructure and a concerted infrastructure, and it includes several components to be successful, from legal framework to looking at trade and investment differently, to understanding different value chains and priority sectors, and basically being champions for environmental and social issues, integrating them and areas of climate change as an area of competitiveness rather than assessment of risk. So in that regard, actually, I'll start with Victor, basically, to get his thoughts on now that we are moving towards the trade agreement. What do you think about the development of value chains and going regional and global, as we discussed overall? How do we do that more effectively to look at the SEZs and value chains as part of the initiative?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, AKINCI. First of all, I think as is the first time I'm taking the floor, I think I would first of all like to thank the organizers for inviting UNIDO to this annual meeting and also be participating to this very important discussion. The consensus is clear about the special economic zone importance to foster economic development, social transformation, and also industrial development. Quickly, when we look at the objective of the SEZs, in terms of static economic outcome, we are expecting a growth of FDI, employment, and economic growth. And then let's explore the result in the last 60 years since the independence, because Africa has been implementing developing economic zone since then. In terms of FDI, we still see that the share of inflow in the continent is one digit, very low. In terms of employment, we see that the share, talking only about manufacturing and employment in the global employment in the manufacturing, including the formal, informal, and also manufacturing related services, Africa is less than 6%. When we consider economic growth, yes, Africa has, we have been, in terms of growth, we have been growing the last decade, and even having 6 out of the 10 among in the continent. But in terms of the determinant of this growth, investment more or less in the mining, in natural resources, and also in the services. Let's see concerning the dynamic economic outcome expected. In terms of technology transfer, the complexity of Africa production, in terms of economic integration, let's only talk about the value chain. We all know the result, and also the social change, very, very, very low. Yeah, so in terms of socio-economic outcome, we see that also the results are not so favorable. So we can just see in terms of other figures, the regional resourcing is still under 12%, when in other regions we are above 20, 40, 60%. Let's see, we have been talking about the agriculture and food. Africa still importing nearly $40 billion of consumption goods. Yeah, and then the estimate is more or less beyond 100%, $100 million of dollars in the next 5 or 7 years if we maintain the status quo. So we see that the SEZ, the performance are very mixed, and in terms of the achievement, we have not achieved so much. Let's go quickly in terms of in terms of employment. We know the figures, nearly 30 millions of quality jobs per year until 2030. We see that the informal sector remains a major source of employment in the continent, and also that the micro and small medium enterprises account for more than 90% of businesses in the African continent. So if we put aside the outcome expected from SEZ and the achievement, we see that in the last 60 years, I think we have not achieved too much. But thanks that with the EFCFTA starting next year, more or less, it will be the 7th decade after the independence. there are opportunities to increase trade and also investment through the movement of goods, services, and other investment. So in addition to that, we see the impact of the COVID-19 in the global economy, particularly in disrupting the value chain, the supply chain, and also in terms of the reduction, the drop in the investment in Africa. Already, this inflow was already too low, but as our colleague from UNTA said, we will be experiencing nearly 25 to 40% decrease in the inflow of investment in the continent. And also many countries are reshoring the production capacity back home for the resilience of the supply chain. When we put all these factors together, we see that we really need to reimagine the economic zone in the continent, the economic zone that will serve the interests of the continent. That's why we are thinking that given this, the implication of the economic zone, instead of the implications are huge. Yeah, the economic zones generally, traditionally, they were forward-looking. So we have to see how the economic zone can participate in forward and also backward linkages, building, strengthening the linkages that will contribute a lot in for sustainable regional value chain. The economic zone were generally the enclaves. So we have to see how we have to broaden and to have inclusive economic zone. I talk about the macro and small medium enterprises. How far are they participating in the supply chain of economic zone? We also have to see that now that the supply chain has been disrupted, the economic zone should have the opportunity to supply, to source within the continent. That will increase the regional sourcing that is very low. But we think that the Secretary General, the deputy said that there has been an increase in this last year from 15 to 18. We hope that with the AFCFTA and also with the innovation we can bring in designing the economic zone, that will increase the regional sourcing. I think in the nutshell, we have to see how the economic zone can better serve also the domestic and the regional market. I think that is key, the regional and also inter-regional market. That will require a lot of work, not only at the political level, but also at the institutional level. I think first of all, the regional cooperation will be key because UNTAD mentioned concerning the disparity in the regulation among the regional economic communities. We have the regulation. We also have, because the economic zone are policy instrument. So they're also the same way they are used to implement industrial policies, national strategies. The change in the way we design the special economic zone will also have an impact on the way we formulate and we conceive, we design the industrial strategy. We will not be only looking at the national, but at the regional. That will require a lot of coherence, building coherence, strengthening coordination of investment. We have the investment promotion agencies, export agencies will have to collaborate more. I think it will coordinating investment, promotion investment strategy will avoid the race to the bottom. It will even attract more foreign investment. We have been talking about building cross-border economic zone. The president of AFDB mentioned the agro-industrial park. We have been collaborating in building those parks in Ethiopia, in also Senegal and other countries. Now we have to move regional and cross-regional. I think this will contribute to strengthen the regional value chain and also even the intra-African trade. I will also mention the micro and small medium enterprises. We have to build cluster. I will say, allow me to say cluster-based economic zone. We have to strengthen, integrate to build the capacity. The spillovers has to be translated also to this type of firm to build the linkages that will strengthen the skills, the capacities, not only the organizational capacities, even the technological capacities, the management capacities, etc. And also, I think in terms of innovation, the community zone, including industrial park, etc., should be part of the national and regional innovation systems to support the small and medium enterprises. I will stop here. Probably I will have the opportunity in the next round probably to say something additional. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Okay, it was I couldn't unmute because it was being prevented. Thank you, Victor. Thank you very much for your intervention. I would like to encourage all the participants to keep to 5 minutes because we are now far behind. And I would like to go next to Stephen, looking from an economic commission perspective to see what you think basically on SEZ's contribution of the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and its objectives, and how can SEZs foster cross-border trade and value chain complementarity across the continent. And I would like to remind everybody to keep it to maybe 5-6 minutes, please.
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Let me first of all acknowledge my fellow panelists, and also to thank AEZO for organizing this, and also to recognize the previous panels because I'm glad that I was able to join. Now, what is it that we have had so far? So we know we have SEZs in Africa. We know the number. We can actually look at the SEZs in Africa in the global context. But we also know that not all special economic zones are successful. And I think that is what Victor was alluding to. I think there is a survey done by Untitled where they found that only 34% of all special economic zones were considered to be fully or sufficiently utilized. Now, also, we know that there are many successful special economic zones. If you look at it in terms of attracting FDI and other ways of measuring the success of these special economic zones. So now the question that our panel is looking at is this question of the special economic zones and the development of the regional value chains. Now, I would want to start by saying, I agree that special economic zones can actually aid in the development of the regional value chains. Why do I say that? I say that because we do actually have evidence, especially from East and Southeast Asia, where special economic zones were expressly established to facilitate not only regional trade, but also exchange of resources. And so we can actually have a lot of discussion based on the experience of Asia to be able to say that special economic zones in Africa can also be used to grow the regional value chains. And I think we can come back to the question of that Stefano was dealing with in terms of the rules of origin and things like that. The other thing that we can say in the context of this question of regional value chains is that local demand plays a large role. I think, again, this is what we have seen in other regions. So if we accept that the African economy is growing, if we also accept that the per capita incomes of Africans are also growing, we do actually see the possibility of playing on this local demand to not only use the SEZs to develop regional value chains, but also have that endogenous relationship with the growth of the African economy. Now, the other thing that also we need to appreciate is that the proximity to other markets is important. And I think this is where now the African Continental Free Trade Area comes in, because we have had special economic zones, of course, with the regional economic communities, and also trying to target the unilateral trade preferences like AGOA, or even the everything but arms. But now we have the African Continental Free Trade Area opening up the barriers between the regional economic community. So we can actually come here and say, maybe it is possible for us to accept that the proximity of the market that is being created by the African Continental Free Trade Area could actually help in deepening the regional, the benefits of the special economic zones. Now, but having said that, we have to know that most special economic zones also provide fewer linkages in regional value chains. And I'm not contradicting myself here. I'm saying this because special economic zones tend to serve, they are established and tend to serve the export-oriented manufacturing hubs for a region. And sometimes they forget to create those linkages within the sub-regions. So coming now strictly to the question of the AFCFTA, and I'm coming to a close because you want us to talk 5 to 6 minutes. I would say, in light of the international experience, special economic zones can help deepen regional integration in Africa under the AFCFTA. Now, we had both from Francis, we also heard from Stefano that the AFCFTA protocol on trading goods does actually have an article on special economic zones. And we also had what kind of conversations have been taking place as the rules of origin conversations have been have actually been had by the member states. But my proposition and on this is that special economic zones can actually be a useful policy tool to boost intra-African trade if the goods that are produced within them satisfy the AFCFTA rule. Now, I know this is an issue that is very contentious in terms of political economy, but I don't agree that the special economic zones have, the better infrastructure that is provided to the special economic zones should be seen as an advantage over whatever else is being produced outside the special economic zone. So for as long as you meet the AFCFTA rules, I actually think we should allow the trading of what is manufactured in the special economic zones within the AFCFTA. And I think this is something that I would want to debate further, because there is no reason why a government that wants to see growth in the AFCFTA market should not provide good incentives to what is being produced outside the special economic zones and have this special treatment of the special economic zones. And then that is being used to say that whatever you are producing within the special economic zones and you meet all the rules of origin, you cannot actually be able to trade it within the AFCFTA. So let me stop here by saying that I think special economic zones are good for deepening regional integration. And I think as long as the rules of the AFCFTA are adhered to, the special economic zones can actually help the AFCFTA achieve its objectives of deepening integration and value addition within the continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the interruption. And I think one of the things here I wanted to highlight is, again, pulling back a step, and you noted this, and I think it will come later in the discussion, is maybe not limiting our also focus to goods. The way SEZs are developing, there's a lot of services component, and it needs to be even more. And one of the things I think we discussed in earlier events is really looking 10, 15, 20 years ahead to design basically the overall trade agreement framework to include basically different complexities in industries, including services and different types of services. I think that's something we still need to think about. I'm going to go to next to MULUALEM. MULUALEM, can you give us your views on how we can use digital technology to support regional value chains, SEZs, especially from a trade point of view? What are your thoughts and examples you can use in this arena?
Thank you very much. First, let me thank AEZO for organizing such excellent platform. Dear panelists, the specialized economic zone have been adopted by many countries as a popular means by which to foster and stimulate economic development. The question is how effectively to apply to the ASEFTA while addressing the challenge of sustainable development and inclusive growth with the high up on global agenda for the enhancement of the SDG, which was mentioning earlier with my colleague from UNIDO. Well, digitalization presents challenges, but also opportunities within the international production network. The very livelihood of the SEZ is the provision of value chain linkage opportunities to companies located within the zone, even outside the zone. It is therefore essential that the advanced digital adoption and connectivity, if they are to remain competitive and relevant players within the network. We understand that the strategic strengths of SEZ in the logistic facilities, e-commerce, distribution activities, and it is national digital policies that government needs in terms of private legislation, data storage, securities. Those are effect for SEZ success. And more generally, it could identify the best way to adapt SEZ value propositions to digital age. In this context, the AETRADE group also brings together public and private sectors partners for developing and expanding e-commerce and ICT-based solutions to enhance intra and inter-Africa trade in the continent, and promotes economic growth, evolving SEZ as a major stakeholders. We encourage African member states to various steps toward making digital platform. So SEZ to act digitally in various activities. For example, having SEZ act and rules, streamline and simplifying the administrative and legal infrastructure to encourage inter-Africa trade oriented business out of the SEZ. This will bring inclusive growth with a vision to transform Africa into a digital empowered society and knowledge economy, which focuses on digital power to African power. In our humble view, ASEFTA state party would prepare, demonstrate the ASEFTA agreement right away, in line that knowing that the SEZ can be a complementary to boost the intra-Africa trade. In this regard, engaging with the national trade facilitation structure in order to ensure that we integrate in the existing ecosystem to country level. It is an ideal entry point for our support to the e-government services and the civil service transformations that are part of our services offering to AU member states. Improving ease of doing business, resulting in a more competitive enterprises, is vital for the continent to generate sustainable trade across the continent. In many cases, we are well positioned to provide last mile solutions for countries that are keen to harness technology. At the Logistic Global Hub and SEZ are reinforced by Africa's long-standing support for the principle of trade liberalization and openness. The SEZ and Smart Logistics Initiative fully enforce the support with long-standing positions, and it is estimated as a guiding principle in Africa trade policies, liberalizations, and openness through the involvement of private operations, facilitate lower costs associated with the trade, and further enhance Africa's attractiveness to foreign direct investment in logistics services and manufacturing. Trade policies have been traditionally guided by the concept of selling of goods in the global market. However, the rise of the global value chain, a new type of thinking is required to reflect current business realities. The new reality is one where the global trade system is based on the production and interconnectivities. Barrier to trade tariff or non-tariff, therefore, take on to the whole new dimension for policymakers within the examine from this angle. This is why the AETRADE group is engaged with the triangular cooperation between government, international organizations, and the private sectors. This is new and needs stakeholders to appreciate the win-win opportunity that will prevent duplications, crowding out of the private sectors. Enabling access to the ACFTA market for empowering tools like SEZ, there is no single entry that can do it alone. We need to work closely together to bring solutions to be able cost effectiveness and user friendly for small and medium entrepreneurs, manufacturers, and sell their product to the African marketplace. So Kuku Africa is friendly for small and medium entrepreneurs. Designed with this mind, it is an inclusive platform that makes it possible for partnership to forge on the digital capacity building. The African Electronic Group platform, Sokuku Africa, which was named by the African Union, provides access and enables businesses, including the small and medium entrepreneurs, as well as consumers, to buy and sell products and services online with the ease and convenience, anytime, anywhere. This will enhance cross-border trade, encourage collaborations among authorities, including SEZs, to formulate effective policies and promote regional and cooperations and economic integrations among African countries. Overall, the smart logistics and fulfillment transport services would promote trade, investment, economic growth, employment, regional connectivities, and integrations, as well as efficiency and cost saving for African, including the SEZ member states. In this line, the logistics and fulfillment program is also within the AETRADE group initiative that is bringing in the next session, will unpack the full program. Thank you.
Thank you, MULUALEM. Thank you very much. And I'm going to last go to Adam, not the least, definitely. Adam, you are working on actually a really innovative, interesting initiative on using technology to create smart and safe path for goods, especially given the COVID era now, but also it's applicable to other basically opportunities and resilience issues in the future. This is something very interesting because we always think about safe passage or facilitating passage of people, not goods in these type of situations. So how is technology helping? How does it work? And what's the future possibilities on this in facilitating regional trade?
Thank you very much, GOKHAN, and also to fellow participants, as well as also to AEZO and all the other esteemed participants. I must say that I'm speaking here as representing Afro Champions as co-chair, but with very, very great excitement to the fact that the spirit of the Continental Free Trade Area gives us massive opportunity to bring Africa's best foot forward. And I'm happy to see some of these champions on the meeting today. AEZO championing African Industrial Revolution, the likes of UNIDO, whom we've been doing a lot of work with, AE-Trade Group with youth technology, UNECA driving Africa's economic transformation through research, technology, among other things. And I think that's really the Africa we want to see. What Afro Champions is interested in, and that's why when COVID struck, we thought that it had a tendency to derail the ability for us to be able to trade, to move goods and people, and to become competitive globally. And if there's one thing that, and I speak as a physician in this regard, is one thing that COVID has taught us is also the fact that we cannot continue to talk about economies without having safe corridors, because the trade is all about movement of people and goods. So one of the primary interventions we made was to see how we could bring countries together and stakeholders together, whether in the tourism sector, the industrial sector, the aviation sector, the business sector, and the innovation sector, because we think that the median of Africa's age today is what, 19.5, 20 years. And a lot of these young people see the world completely different from how most of our policymakers see the world. They see the world through technology, they see the world through innovation. And the only way to make them feel a part of the solution is to get them to be part of any solution-seeking endeavor that we're looking for. And so what we did was to develop a software or a technological platform that took all of the interventions and ideas from the various stakeholders and programmatized it into a tool that will enable us to create a framework within which we can harmonize our restrictions, entry and exit requirements, enable tests done in one country to be able to verify it by another, and also to be able to, under the African Union Open Corridor Initiative, create the kind of safe corridors in which emergency goods and essential products can begin to move safely, so that we are not barricaded in silos, just as the world is currently seen to be barricaded in silos. I think what Africa has demonstrated with their Africa Trusted Travel portal, that the Africa Center for Disease and Control, which is, we believe is the continent's champion for promoting public health, is currently championing is bringing again private sector expertise, resources, innovation as a public digital good to support public institutions like the Africa CDC and African Union to create that kind of technology platform. So I'm happy to announce that the Trusted Travel portal is currently now live. About 54 countries have currently inputted their entry and exit restrictions, because the challenge is that people start moving from one country. You manufacture goods in one country, you want to move it to the other, and you cannot move because one country requires a certain kind of test, another country requires 48 hours, 72 hours, other countries require PCR tests, other countries require antigen tests. Airline officials are not able to tell the difference. But with this kind of system, the individual traveling with goods, wherever you're trying to go, the system just runs a compliance check to see if you've met all the requirements of that country, and then generates a code for you to be able to travel. We've now currently integrated most of the private labs on the continent, most of the airlines, and we're currently now in the process of getting Kenya to go live next week, and other countries. We're focusing on the hubs now, and other countries will follow. Beyond that, the technology is also looking at our logistics corridors, our ports, hotels, and all of the places where people and goods congregate, and ensure that we have protocols that are programmatized into tools and softwares that enables, because it's hard for people to remember all the guidelines and requirements and restrictions. But once they are programmed into the tool, they get the necessary alerts, they're reminded what to do, what not to do, how to pack goods, how many people should be working in a factory, how to maintain social distance protocols, among other things. So AEZO is clearly one of our partners within the Pan-Belts Consortium, of whom we went through a series of consultations whilst we're developing the solution. And so this is really the background to the Africa Trusted Travel Portal. I'm happy to announce that it's now going global. Big hubs from other parts of the world now have approached us, and for one of the few times, we're going to see an African solution now that can go global. So in 2 weeks, we'll be launching Global Haven, which now will be able to take this solution to UAE, to Singapore, among other countries, but simply because we had an African Union backing a solution of this nature. So thank you very much. That's the background to the Trusted Travel Portal.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. I think this is very helpful. And I think given we have very limited time, the organizers asked me to actually close it with a brief note. But I think we could probably talk about this session for a long time, because it was very interesting to see how each of the panelists looked at the topic from a different perspective, from basically an economic commission, the trade perspective, from technology perspective in facilitating trade, from how do we move goods and people in a fashion where actually we facilitate them in the COVID arena and in basically times of distress, to basically how do we look at this issue at a regional but also a global and a country level. I think it's very interesting, and it's also very interesting to see there's so much homegrown innovation and thinking going on the topic in Africa itself. And I think this hopefully will be the platform to actually maybe say in several years from now on that some of the best performing and most interesting and facilitative SEZs maybe will be in Africa. Instead of what we have in terms of the legacy EPZs in the continent. So that's really interesting. And it also highlighted a number of things that the panelists brought up, looking at how do we look at linkages, not only within the country, but within the region and sub-regions themselves. And how do we make sure that this point is actually embedded in the discussion of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement too. And then it can trickle into those other sub-regional agreements to make sure that we are innovative, we are looking into the future. The same is true in incorporating services in our thinking, because services have become part of zones, SEZs, industrial infrastructure, as an investor and as a facilitator. And we can't really only think about goods, we need to enhance our thinking to include services as sectors, as also facilitators in the manufacturing sector. We also need to think about what's the changing shape of value chains globally, but also regionally. And what does it mean for the agreement, and what does it mean for SEZs, for open thinking to facilitate that effectively in developing ecosystems. And also technology and innovation. This has not been basically on the forefront of SEZ thinking, but technology and innovation will actually be the venue to take SEZs, the value chains, to the next phase of their development, to help develop more competitive and productive clusters in Africa, regionally, in the subcontinent, and within the countries. And these are things probably we need to think about and take into more serious and significant consideration as part of the trade agreement, but as part of actually national and regional policymakers thinking in developing SEZs and designing basically the overall ecosystems around them. And I'll close it here. Apologies for not taking questions, but I think we have time limitations. But hopefully we will take on these different points in the follow-on basically events that we organize together with African Free Zones Organization, UNIDO, UNCTAD, and all the participants. And I'd like to thank also AFZO for the fantastic basically design, facilitation, and organization of this meeting. We are looking forward to the future events. Thank you, everybody.